Joining us now, Senator Ron Johnson, Republican from Wisconsin. Senator, thanks so much for coming.
Good morning.
Really appreciate it. All right, I'm getting worried here because clock is ticking. Should we allow a vacation without legislation?
No, I'm happy to stay here until we get this thing fixed. But, you guys understand how absurd this process is. We've done this with the debt ceiling, the super committee. Now we're back here again where we've got, two people and their unelected staffs negotiating the financial future of America. I mean, this is absolutely absurd. And why is that? It's because the Democrats haven't shown us their plan. We have nothing to compromise with. Listen, I'm happy to work with anybody who's willing to first acknowledge the problem and then work with me in good faith to fix it. But I don't see that from the other side. I mean, the House has passed 2 budgets, including proposals to save Medicare. The Democrats in the Senate have not passed a budget in 3 years. They haven't voted for any plan whatsoever because they don't want their fingerprints on a plan to actually save this country. And President Obama, his last 2 budgets have been voted on now 3 times in Congress. Final vote tally is 0 to 610. So until I see a serious plan on the table, I don't know what I'm supposed to compromise with.
If Republicans get their way, you get through this fiscal cliff, let's say there is some sort of a deal, you're going to be right back in the same situation in 6 weeks talking about the deficit, the debt ceiling again.
If Republicans had their way, we would be spending $7 trillion less over the next 10 years, because that's the difference between the House budget and the president's budget. $7 trillion. We're always talking about a minimum of $4 trillion. Well, the House budget has already done that. They've put that template out there, because that's really what a budget is. It's showing this is the most you can spend. Now take that information committees and start crafting the legislation under that fiscal constraint. That's the way the process ought to work. Then you'd actually have elected officials debating back and forth in committees and committee markup in the view of the American people, as opposed to behind closed doors, literally with unelected staff members trying to hammer all this stuff out in 2 or 3 weeks. It's an absurd process.
Okay, so we go over the cliff then. We get a recession. It was meant to create a recession. Why did we get to the point where the Republicans agreed, it's supposed to be so pro-business, to agree to a situation where we know we're going to have a recession? Why didn't you fight that hard?
Well, first of all, I wasn't here, and I wouldn't have.
Okay,
temporary tax cuts.
You would have been against this.
Temporary tax cuts are not wise because it just sets up that level of uncertainty. Mm-hmm. And the thing that is holding back this economy. And listen, I was in manufacturing for 31 years. Business people want some level of uncertainty from government.
Agree.
I mean, you have enough uncertainty in business. Business is hard, by the way. Mm-hmm. President Obama thinks, well, these guys can pay it. They can afford it. Listen, it is not easy to conceive of a product and then produce that product at a cost that is lower than what you can get somebody to buy it for. That is hard. That's why most businesses fail. And now Washington is going to increase the tax burden on small to medium-sized businesses. Now Washington is continuing to increase the regulatory burden. That's the problem is the size of government. All of government's intrusion in our lives, all the rules and the regulations. If you want to get this economy going, and I think you could get it going, reduce the federal government's influence on business people's lives and on Americans' lives, and we could get this economy moving forward.
We got the capital gains rate pretty low. I've started 5 businesses, some successful, some not successful. When they were not successful, government had nothing to do with it. When they were successful, the government had nothing to do with it. A great idea where you work hard and this country works. Why do we talk about the government's intervention? Why don't we just talk about how good business can be with or without the government?
Because what has happened in the last 30 years is we have gotten this regulatory environment, for example, that according to President Obama's own Small Business Administration, the study they commissioned costs $1.75 trillion per year to comply with. Now, that's a number that is larger than all but 8 economies in the world. That's the kind of burden we're putting on small business people. And listen, I lived through business over those 30 years. I've talked to business people that talked to me that started their businesses back in the 70s and 80s and tell me, Ron, there's no way I could start this business and grow it the way I did in the current regulatory environment. And again, now what are we talking about? What is President Obama's demand? Let's increase taxes, tax rates on the top 2%, which is, there's 1 million small businesses, medium-sized businesses included in that figure. Those are the successful ones. That, by the way, small to medium-sized businesses are the engine of not only economic growth, job creation, but innovation. And just take a look at what's happening. You have to look at the unintended consequences of these tax increases. What's happening right now with Obamacare and the 2.3% medical device tax. I sold into that industry. You have medical device manufacturers moving overseas. You've got Democratic senators going, boy, that wasn't such a good idea. Let's not enact that 2.3% medical device tax.
Especially in Indiana.
And not only those primary manufacturers, cost jobs, but all their suppliers, their number 1 and 2 tier suppliers, they're not going to be able to supply those companies anymore. Not into Europe, not into China.
I know you are a man of principle. I know that you firmly believe this is the right path. If there is a deal that is carved out between Boehner and the president, if they are able to reach some sort of an agreement, it may have things in it, or I know for a fact it will have things in it that you don't like. Would you go along with something if it matches up in terms of spending cuts that you'd like to see, or would you rather go over the fiscal
avoid the cliff?
In the Republican primary debate, when they asked that question, would you take a deal where there's $1 of revenue for $10 of spending cuts? You know, if I knew those were structurally locked in, that we actually fixed the problem, I'd take that deal.
You're not going to get 1 for 10.
But I know. Becky, it's a hypothetical. I have no idea. Let's just talk about growth, though. Just real quick, a couple numbers. Even with the miserable growth we've experienced from 2009 to 2012, do you know how much revenue has increased the federal government per year? $344 billion. If we just return to a normal economy, where we have revenue generation, which is average 18.1, or 2007, 18.5%, that would add another $434 billion per year. Add those up, that's more than $750 billion. In President Obama's Punish Success scheme would raise somewhere between 34 and 75. It's 10% of what you get with economic growth. But here's the problem.
Let's bring the soldiers back from Korea. What are they doing there? How about from Japan? How do we cut that defense budget now?
Jim, I'm not disagreeing with you.
Well, give us some. Who should we pull back? What divisions? What divisions should come back?
First audit the Defense Department so we even know where the money's being spent. So I'm not disagreeing with you on defense. But I tell you what, you want to really attack what's going to be an explosion in costs? It's Obamacare. Obamacare is so vastly or grossly underestimated in terms of costs. I mean, currently, the current budget window is $1.7 trillion. When true spending kicks in, 2.5. And Jim, that assumes only 1 million employees lose their employer-sponsored care, get dumped in highly subsidized exchange. It'll be tens of millions. I understand. People have their head in the sand on that one. That will add trillions of dollars to our deficit over the next 10 years, and nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody's talking about Medicare anymore because the Democrats have taken that off the table. I'm asking the Democrats, show us your plan. Then I know what I'm going to compromise with.
But in theory, there is a plan that would exist that you would say, okay, I'm not going to go along with the pledge that I signed. This is a plan that I think is better for the nation, and I'll do it.
I need to see structural reform in spending, so I know we have got things locked in. But Becky, I have.
Darn it, we got that recession coming.
What am I supposed to do here? Negotiate with myself?
Well, we don't want a recession.
I need to.
You're against the recession.
Listen. I've done a lot of negotiating in my life. I know when somebody is sitting across that table negotiating in good faith, and when somebody's just moving the goalposts. What has this president done? He comes in.
Well, everyone's talking about those goalposts moving. I don't know. I'm a big professional football fan. I don't see him going. I just would like to know how to avoid the recession.
Well, what you should do is extend all the current tax rates and then start working toward pro-growth tax reform, like Simpson-Bowles is talking about, lower the top marginal tax rate because that is the incentivizing nature of the tax code. I'm happy to get rid of special deals. I mean, I didn't have Government Affairs Office lobbying me here in Congress. I'd be happy to get rid of all deductions, lower the tax rate. And here's something I'm really concerned about. Is if we increase taxes on the top 2%, you're going to be increasing taxes on subchapter S LLCs up to over 40% with the Medicare tax. The next shoe that'll drop is corporations, the large C Corps are going to be coming in here going, come on, you got to get us competitive with the world. Go from 35 to 25. Now you've got small, medium businesses, the innovators. They're going to be competing at a 40% tax rate versus corporations at 25.
I work my butt off and I'm at 48% effective tax. I don't feel like quitting. I don't feel like going to another country. I'm at 48%, sir. I think a lot of people like me.
So what we need to do at a minimum, if we're going to increase taxes on the top 2%, I sure hope we decouple business income from that. And what I'd like to do is couple subchapter S and LLC business tax with C Corp so that we don't have that disparity.
Senator, we'll have to have you back because this sounds like a much longer, more comprehensive conversation.
No
Senator,
recession.
thank you very much for your time today. We appreciate it. And guys,